Hi everybody, thanks for coming today. My name is Luis, people call me Lucho. I'm from the Latin American Solidarity Network, representing the organization Barrio Nuevo. The Latin American Solidarity Network is an umbrella organization in Toronto that works to bring together the different solidarity work that's being done around Latin America and the Caribbean as a means of basically drawing on the experience of Latin America of knowing that the unity is strength and that we're far more effective. The Latin American Solidarity Network has existed for a couple of years now, but it was actually the situation in Honduras that really gave it a lot of force. It was an impulse for us to become better organized and more united. Essentially, the task of responding to the situation, the coup d'etat on June 28th, 2009 in Honduras, in Toronto, fell to the Latin American Solidarity Network as there previously existed no organized Honduran solidarity organization. And last year we did a number of public events immediately after the coup. We did a rally in front of Bob Ray's office, then we did a rally in front of Peter Kent's office, organizing a caravan to go there. Rallies in front of the consulate. We were able to draw a lot of attention, and even were able to organize a solidarity delegation that went down. I was part of that delegation in September, and able to build people-to-people solidarity with the Honduran resistance there. We spent some time filming a documentary, not because we were any kind of professional filmmakers, but because it was a means of getting the Honduran voice to the people of Toronto and Ontario and at large, to let them represent their struggle themselves. I won't speak for too long, but I do want to, one quote from that experience actually, I think really demonstrates why it's important for us to pay attention to Honduras and to Latin America in general. We were interviewing Bertha Cáceres, and she's one of the organizers with an organization called COPIN, which is it's kind of a coalition organization of indigenous and popular groups. And she said, you know, before this coup d'etat, before the resistance became organized, people really only knew Honduras for two things. One was that Hurricane Mitch happened here and devastated the country. And second, that we were the base for the Contras in the Central American conflict. But now they know that Honduras is a proud and a dignified country that has the ability to resist and to organize. So just a little bit of summary of events. So I'm assuming that most people are pretty aware that there was the coup d'etat on June 28th. There was a number of attempts by the legitimate president to return to power. First via airplane 1 week later, which was denied by the armed forces. Then shortly after that by land, which again was denied by the armed forces and the de facto government. And then finally he was actually able to clandestinely enter the country in actually the trunk of a car and sneaked in with some allies, where he emerged at the Brazilian embassy, where he was held virtually captive by the de facto government with very limited access to the outside. The army had the whole area completely encircled. And the de facto government went on pretending that it wasn't a coup government, that it was a government that was constitutional succession, and went ahead with fraudulent elections, which had an enormously low participation rate. There were no international observers present, and most people said that they wouldn't stand the rigors of being a free and fair election. So to kind of very quickly bring us up to speed, that's where we're at now. We have a government in Honduras that is in power as a result of a government that was put in there illegitimately, therefore making this current government illegitimate, which still pretends to think to itself to be and try to engage in false truth commissions and false dialogues with the Honduran resistance. Well, Todd, who's been there more recently, will be able to expand on the work of the National Front of Popular Resistance. But we're not here to only talk about Honduras. We're also here to talk about the broader imperialist strategy of not just the United States, but Canada as well. And I think that's particularly important to highlight, especially with Honduras, because I have a lot of confidence saying that Peter Kent and the Harper government played a far more reactionary role than even the United States with respect to Honduras and with respect to Haiti, which is what we're here to talk about, those two countries in particular, which highlights the role that Canada, as an imperialist nation, is engaging in Latin America and the Caribbean. So I just want to thank the organizers, Latin American Solidarity Network, the Center for Social Justice, who's providing the space, Toronto Haiti Action Committee, Socialist Project, and the Toronto New Socialist. We're going to begin with an introduction on the current developments, the situation in Haiti by BC Holmes from the Toronto Haiti Action Network.
Okay. My name is BC Holmes. I work for Toronto Haiti Action Committee. I want to talk about the coups in Haiti and some analysis that's been done by in particular some academics. I want to say to start off that much of what I want to talk about has been said more eloquently by better people, and in particular I want to do a shout out to Peter Hallward, whose material I found hugely informative in preparing this particular talk this evening. His book, Damming the Flood, is possibly the most important book on the 2004 coup, in particular why the 2004 coup is significant, especially when we look at things that are going on in Honduras, and that I expect to continue on in other countries as well. But at some level, I don't just want to refer to him, because at some, fundamentally he is still an academic, and I think that there are elements of his book that are very academic. And it's very easy to get into sort of academic, high-level language, this is the concept, this is what's going on. To sort of ground me in that, I want to reference the fact that I was in Haiti just after Christmas, just prior to the earthquake hitting there. And one of the things that I and the group I was traveling with were trying to do were to understand what have been the long-term implications of the 2004 coup in Haiti. And the implications are, extremely catastrophic and extremely violent. Talking to people was a hugely demoralizing exercise. And in one level, it was a hugely thrilling exercise in that, there was clear resistance, there was clear mobilization, there was clear community organizing just days before we arrived. There was a huge rally, about the coup that had happened 6 years earlier. I can't think of many places in Canada, or any place in Canada, where 6 years after a significant event happens, people still come out and make noise about it, but that's still happening in Haiti, and that is significant. But we were also meeting with victims of violence, not just random violence, but violence that are the result of UN peacekeepers, allegedly, who are down there supposedly securing the place. They went in specifically because of the coup and have been responsible for huge amounts of violence, and when you speak to victims of that violence face to face, it has a huge emotional toll. Part of what interests me in this particular conversation has to do with some of Hallward's analysis about what the 2004 coup in Haiti meant. In particular, his entire book, Damming the Flood, talks about the difference between the 1991 coup that happened in Haiti and the 2004 coup that happened in Haiti. And I think that many of the conclusions that he draws about those differences make a lot of sense and reveal a lot about what's going on in Honduras and what we can expect from the future. Just in case people aren't aware of the differences between 1991 and 2004 coups in Haiti, let me try to use a more crass, high-level difference example or contrasting example. And he himself used this particular example when Toronto Haiti Action Committee had him here in June of 2008. So he used the example of Iraq, which was, an invasion that happened in 2003, and the 2004 coup, very close together, in both cases, clear imperialist goals. But what he articulated in his talk was the idea that Iraq itself was an expensive form of invasion. It was a difficult form of invasion. It didn't really seem to be working. Like, in many ways, the government lost the confidence of the American public, possibly the Canadian public. The objectives really hadn't fully been met. There was huge amounts of resistance locally, etc., and it cost a heck of a lot of money. What Hallward observed was that the coup that happened in Haiti was, in many ways, a much more successful endeavor in that it, like Iraq, it managed to overthrow a government. It managed to completely change the sort of government, the Haitian government's economic agendas, their pro-democracy agendas, etc., but did so relatively cheaply, mostly under the radar of most Canadians. Most Canadians don't have any idea about what happened in Haiti, and fairly completely and fairly succinctly. even now, when I was there just after Christmas, the effects of that coup are enormous in terms of having disenfranchised the pro-democracy Lavalas movement from the government process, etc. These effects are still playing out. And so what Hallward argued was that what we were seeing between Iraq and Haiti, or more accurately, between the 1991 coup in Haiti and the 2004 coup, was really the evolution of a politics of deflection, containment, and subversion. He said, his book is actually subtitled Haiti and the Politics of Containment. And what he's saying is that, the imperial powers like the US and Canada have evolved their tactics in terms of how to overthrow and control a foreign government. And what he argued at the time, in 2008 when he was here, and also in his book, was that, this is the model that we're going to see going forward. And he said, we're probably going to see it in places like Venezuela, we're probably going to see it in places like Cuba, because he said, in many ways, Haiti can be perceived of as a laboratory in which organizations like the CIA and the US Foreign Affairs or Foreign State Department can experiment and try out to see exactly what it is that they can get away with. And so I think, he pointed to some very big states, some relatively powerful states. I think that Honduras is actually the first example of trying to take that model of the new form of containment and subversion and trying to apply it to a new country. And so that's one of the things that makes me very happy about this particular panel, in that I think that it's important to look at the things that have been learned in Haiti activism and try to see how it applies and is similar or slightly different than the way it applies in analyzing the Honduran coup. So some of the things that stood out to me as I was watching the Honduran coup include things like, very similarly to what happened in the Haitian coup, even amongst the so-called progressive left, there was this general ambivalence about what was going on, and in fact tacit support about what was going on. People would be saying things like, oh, well, I heard Zelaya is, doing terrible things to destroy democracy in Honduras, etc. And, this is the same sort of thing that people were saying about Haiti when the coup happened in Haiti. People were like, but hasn't Aristide turned into another Duvalier? Didn't he get involved in human rights abuses? And so when asked the question, like, how was that happening? How was that made possible? And what were the sort of strategies that were actually employed to bring that kind of thing about? And so here's where I think Hallward's analysis is really crucial. He spent a lot of time looking at the two very different sorts of coups. The first that happened in 1991, the second that happened in 2004 in Haiti, both against the same guy. Aristide was the president of the country in both cases. And yet the first coup was a much more traditional military type of coup, It's clear that the US did not want to go along, and Canada did not want to go along with the sort of vision of the future of the country that people like Aristide were putting forward. Justin Potter was in this room just a few months ago, and he articulated this quite nicely. He said, Aristide had a relatively modest agenda. He said he just wanted to move the people from absolute misery to poverty with dignity. Like, that's not radical socialism we're talking about here. That's a very, very modest objective. And yet, that was too progressive and too scary for the imperial powers. But in 1991, Aristide was an inexperienced politician. His political base was very vocal and very mobilized, but at the same time, not politically experienced. And so it was possible for the first several months, to just sort of stymie any attempt on Aristide's part to introduce change. And that happened for about 9 months. And then, as that started to weaken, in comes the military, and they throw Aristide out of the government and out of the country, etc. And so that's a really traditional type of military invasion. But by the time you get around to 2004, a few things have happened. So first up, after Aristide returned to the country in 94, he dismantled the army, which really threw a spanner in the works from the point of view of countries like the US and Canada, who are accustomed to using the local military to support coups and to create these coups. But, the U.S. can spend a lot of money on smart people thinking up good ways to overthrow governments. And so they came up with an alternative. Like, what do you, the fundamental question that they're really asking was, what do you do when you have, you know, this government in place, no local army that you can, you know, subvert and use to enforce a coup or to create a coup? You know, how do you do it differently? And what Hallward argues is that there's really four main plans here, or four main tools that the powers were using. And so the first tool is a relatively straightforward one. It's the economic tool. And that one's not new, but, you know, used in slightly different ways in this particular case. So when Aristide was re-elected in the country in 2004, for his second term in office, the US and Canada cut off aid, you know, worked with international financial institutions to suspend aid and suspend, you know, already promised loans, etc. They were trying to economically strangle the country. Not necessarily a new strategy, but you know, had a fairly significant impact. Nonetheless, you know, even with this huge economic strangulation going on in the country, the Aristide government was still able to accomplish a great deal with minimal amounts of money. The second one that Hallward articulated was the idea of developing a parapolitical opposition. And so what he asserts is that organizations, and here's a case where I think Canada, through CIDA, the Canadian International Development Agency, actually played a very strong role, was to approach all of the political opponents of Aristide, including all of the people who lost the 2000 elections, and try to unite them together into one larger political opposition party. And then, in creating this political opposition party, this is a if you find any references to this process on CIDA's website, they refer to it with such great terms as promoting democracy. This is what they mean by promoting democracy. In a place like Haiti, they find all of the opposition parties and they, you know, bring them together and help them print up signs and TV commercials and stuff like that. Hallward says, you know, these guys, even all together, didn't really manage to get more than 15% of the vote in that particular election. But, you know, they were promoted by the US and Canada as an extremely powerful opposition group, so powerful in representing so much of the political landscape that the Aristide government must listen to their concerns about what's going on. Aristide had, you know, clear majority, the most number of seats, etc. And yet, once this official opposition was put into place, the US, you know, pressured the Aristide government to say, you must concede to the various things they were insisting on. One particular example of that was 1 week before Aristide was ousted in the 2004 coup. What's his name? Roger Noriega, the U.S. State Department goon, went down to Haiti to force Aristide to make a number of concessions, including allowing the opposition to choose the prime minister. So Aristide is the president. One of the powers of the president is the ability to choose the prime minister in Haiti. I think this was in many ways a ploy to, you know, be able to come back and stand in front of TV cameras and say, Aristide refuses to concede anything to us. And Aristide, you know, I think pulled one over on them and said, you know, no, I'll concede that. I will concede without hesitation. I will grant that particular permission. At which point, you know, the opposition said, no, okay, we can't take this deal. It's a terrible deal, etc. And 1 week later, like I say, Noriega, 1 week later, Aristide was out. So that's the second of these two main tools of constructing this new type of coup. The third is, of course, one of the most interesting ones. It was the creation not of a military option, but of a paramilitary option. So in Haiti, the way that most of us saw the coup in 2004 playing out started with reports that would appear on our TV that would say things like, a group of citizens have banded together and are, you know, seeking to overthrow the government in Haiti, and they're, you know, fighting in the small cities and towns there, etc. In many ways, some people point to this as an official smokescreen, that, so long as this was going on, they had no chance whatsoever of overthrowing the government. If they had entered into Port-au-Prince, the people would just sort of rise up against them. There was no chance whatsoever that they could overthrow the government. There, however, was a really good chance that they could hurt and kill a lot of people in the course of doing so. But in many ways, what they lent to the whole coup process was this story that the international media could report on to help us poor Canadians understand what happened in Haiti. It was sort of, here is something going on that explains why Aristide ultimately leaves at the end of this entire process. It's the official story that the people rose up against the elected leader of the country, and that's why he had to flee, or whatever was going to happen to him would happen. These things aren't true. I mean, Aristide was phenomenally popular when he was elected. He was still phenomenally popular on the day of the coup. The days after the coup, thousands and thousands of people, tens of thousands of people came out to demonstrate against his removal, his kidnapping, etc. So that paramilitary option became an important element of the entire story, but they were not being used in the same way that a traditional military coup happened. They were not driving tanks up to the palace and forcing the government to step down. In many ways, they were just acting as this media spectacle that our international media could pay attention to. And then the fourth element of this particular new strategy for a coup was ideological humanitarian component, which I think is a verbose phrase that basically has to do with the creation of a large body of organizations, many of them non-governmental organizations, whose job it was to repeat a story often enough about how the Aristide government had become corrupt, had become tyrannical, had become violent. And as I said at the beginning, most of the people that I talked to at the time of the coup, even amongst the progressive left, had clearly taken in this message. Like, they believed that what they had heard was that Aristide had become another Duvalier, they had become corrupt, and that's why they were just sort of on the fence about what was going on in Haiti. Clearly, these organizations succeeded. To use some examples that are directly related and directly tied to what's going on in Canada, organizations such as Rights and Democracy in Canada, which has been in the news recently, Alternatives in Quebec. The one I know best is the National Coalition for Haitian Rights in Haiti. There's a Haitian office and a New York office. The New York office is not evil. The Haitian office is evil, in simple terms. These were organizations that have been funded in a very large way by our own Canadian International Development Agency, CIDA. And their job, in many ways, was to make sure that they were saying ugly things about the Aristide regime. NCHR Haiti, in particular, produced a huge volume of material talking about, the Haitian government being behind massacres and human rights abuses and assassinations of political opponents. And they said these things endlessly for 4 years, trying to smear the Aristide campaign. None of these claims are today respected by any legitimate human rights organizations like Amnesty International. But they were extremely vocal at the time, and often ended up, their reports often ended up being repeated by organizations like Human Rights Watch, because these organizations can't be in every country at the same time. But the moment that the coup happened, these same organizations pretty much fell silent. And yet, that is the moment after the coup when the worst of the human rights violations began, because the organizations, the military occupation that happened in the country after the coup were the ones that really caused the worst damage. I think Hallward argues that, if you believe that Aristide had anything to do with particular deaths of political opponents, if you counted up all of the even marginal claims, at best you're talking 10 to 30 people, that Aristide or his supporters are supposed to have killed. And yet, some legitimate scientific journals have said, in the first 22 months after the coup, something like 8,000 people have been killed, half of those by official actors like the Haitian National Police. Like, it's night and day when you consider what's going on there. So I think it's interesting to think about things in terms of Hallward's analysis about what this new type of coup looks like, and to try to reflect on how those strategies are going to continue to play out in other Latin American countries. And I think that Honduras is probably one of the first non-Haitian countries in which some of these strategies have been tried out. And I think we're going to see more of it going forward. So I think that's where I will end. Thank you.
It's an absolutely perfect point to end on, and I think why this meeting today is important, because the reality is that the danger of another coup happening is a very serious one, and then should that come to pass, then it's going to be people in this room and the organizations present, they're going to need to respond, and that type of work, it does resonate. I want to share just a very brief little anecdote with you. The solidarity work that we did in Toronto, albeit modest, you know, perhaps helped save lives. Maybe not directly, but we met with the independent candidate to the presidency, the president of a bottling workers union there, and he said, you know, the first thing I want to say to you guys is thank you for being here, because, you know, had it not been for the international media and the international solidarity that came out immediately after the coup, what we would have seen here would have been a bloodbath, would have been a massacre, and nobody would have heard about it. It would have been more of the classical sense of the coup. Instead, they, you know, had to go with coup 2.0. And that does make a difference, you know. Of course, there was a lot of blood that was spilled as a result of the coup, but you know, the solidarity efforts did go a long way, and it's not that they go unnoticed. You know, people certainly understand that we are here in, you know, the developed world with a lot of comfort, and that for us to stand in solidarity does mean a lot. So we're going to move on to Jose Martinez. He's a member of the National Front of Resistance, Toronto. And the National Front of Resistance Against the Coup was originally formed right after, in the days after the coup. It was actually discussions that happened in front of the presidential palace where the rallies were happening. And this decision, it's actually a really complex structure, and as someone who likes to focus on the positive things that happen out of political situations, there's a lot of inspiration to be drawn from the National Front of Resistance. They initially were just a coalition of the different organizations that were opposed to the coup, but as the process unfolded, their own political development became deeper. And by that I mean the organization has a profound depth in society. There are committees that are organized at the base in neighborhoods, which then select delegates that represent people at the city level, at the regional level, at the department, provincial level, and then finally at the national level. Working in as horizontally as possible, making the most decisions at the base level. And of course, there'll be international chapters like the one we have in Toronto. Jose Martinez has traveled to Honduras a number of times since the coup, and is a member of the Honduran community here, and is going to share with us his commentary. Jose.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I've been down to Honduras so many times, but I don't recommend anyone to go down there now. It's so dangerous that I'll be talking to that. And I just want to be brief reporting on what's going on down there, because there are so many things that we can talk. We can spend days and nights and we won't finish, but this is going to be brief. Right now there is a place in Honduras that we call it Bahua 1. It's just a small town. There are 6,000 families being locked in by the government, by the army. And tonight we're expecting them to be hunting. The army is going to be hunting people in those trees and maybe shooting them. Because they said tonight at midnight there's going to be like thousands of people killed all over those places. Because there are some lands that they are disputing with the government. And 6,000 families. There are kids, there are women, there are elders. So everyone is in very, very high risk tonight. And we got that report last night to advise all of them. They've been without food, they've been without water for the last 3 days. And they are expecting that tonight they would be, I don't know, they will arrest so many people. That's the last news that we had last night. But this has been going on and on and on since June 29 to 28 that the coup took place in Honduras. Every day we get one person killed by every hour and a half. We have those numbers. In Latin America, there was only Colombia with the highest number of crimes per every 1,000 people. There was 81 people being killed for every 100,000. In Honduras, it was 33 people being killed every 100,000 people. After the coup, it jumped to 84 people killed by every 100,000. So it went like 100 to 100%. And our people down there, they don't have the right information because our radio stations, they've been shut down. There were 3 radio stations. There were Radio Globo, Radio Progreso, and Radio Uno. And just Radio Uno is being giving information to people what's going on. Like most of the country, they don't know that these 6,000 families may be killed overnight tonight. And there are some newspapers that they just talking about the World Cup, soccer World Cup coming up in June, and they are just talking about something else. They're talking about Ricky Martin or something. But nobody is talking about these people that they are high risk to be killed overnight tonight. The Human Rights Committee of Honduras, they sent me some information. 146 people have been documented, been killed, and 300 people reported as missing. They say they found a big lagoon where there is full of crocodiles. Yeah, and I think they are right now investigating that people are being thrown alive for food to those little crocodiles. And so they are investigating that. And who's doing that? The army. And 90% of those people being killed belong to the National Resistance Front. So we are expecting that in the next 2 or 3 months, things in Honduras get much, much worse. This radio station that we have, they are telling everyone out of the country, because they can listen to that radio through the internet, and said, stay where you are. If you're in Canada, stay in Canada. If you are in the States, stay there. Don't come to Honduras. Because when you go down there, you're in high risk and nobody's going to be responding for your life. And that's after the coup. Before that, there were so many, even tourists from Canada, they were flying direct from Montreal to La Ceiba. So far we have 4,000 members of the Resistance Front being arrested. And just we have 1,500 people being injured. Some of them lose a leg, some lose a hand, some are very sick, dying very slow. And yes, that's just the crime happening in Honduras right now. That's what's going on. The economy right now is so bad that there used to be, let's say, out of 10 people working, now there is only 3 people working, so 7 are unemployed. Those 7 people are on the street right now. They go without food. They got families to feed. And So when you see all of those things, you say, okay, what's going to happen next 3 months, next maybe 2 years? What are we doing? What the international community is doing to help our country to solve this problem? Nobody is talking about solving this problem in Honduras or in the international community. The international community is talking about pressing the government, pushing it more to give up what they've been taking over. And what these guys are doing, just killing our people, killing and killing and killing, and they won't stop. The National Resistance Front is talking right now about election in June, they call it Cuarta Urna, again, in June 28. And we believe that's not the solution to the problem that we have in Honduras. That's not going to help at all. What we're going to do with that is just spend millions and millions of lempiras, that those lempiras can help people to have some water or some food. So that's not going to bring up any solution. They are talking about a new constitution. We cannot have a new constitution under a de facto government, because that's what we have right now. We don't have a legal elected democratic government. What we have is a continue. After the military coup, we have the second phase of the coup. So we're not going to solve anything with new constitution or with because who's gonna elect those guys who will write the new constitution? Same government that is in the power right now, and who's that government? It's the coup, the military coup. Who's controlling the country? The military guys. So what I suggest, and I ask everywhere I talk, is that if we're gonna do something, or if we're gonna help with something down there to push these governments out of the country, like to push Peter Kent, to push Harper harder, and tell them this is what's going on in Honduras, this is what we have. Our taxes are being used to send weapons and to send bullets for those guys to keep their own people. And when we talked to this guy, Peter Kent, he said, no, Honduras is nice. Oh, no, I've been down there. And no, nothing is happening. And then we explained to him, and we said, yeah, nothing is happening in here, because the media in here is not showing what's going on down there. And the only ones who are telling people what's going on is the one who go down there, bring some videos, and they leave the situation down there. Those are the ones who can tell what's going on. Like in my case, we got a lot of tear gas, we got bullets. I have some video in YouTube that you can hear the shots. You can see people rolling on steps when they got shot in the back or their legs. And so if we can do something here, is keep this flame alive, keep informing groups, keep sending the information out there as much as we can. Let's use the internet, let's use the media in any way. It has to go somewhere, that information, and somebody has to do something at the end.